Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. The first story is called Strict New Manager. This happened a few years ago, when I was working as an external developer for a software house. The team was great, and the lead developer, let's call him Mark, was simply the best to work with. He was a very skilled developer, and also could easily coordinate the team's tasks. We also had a manager, John, who was also very friendly and easy to talk to. Our job was going smoothly. The company tracked the progress of the various projects in our software, where John divided them in various steps. John set up these steps very broadly, to avoid creating too many of them. We then needed to input the time we spent on each of these steps. If the project was missing some steps or hit the budget cap, we couldn't input our timesheets, and technically weren't allowed to start working. Per company policy, our duty was to inform our direct superior about this issue, in this case Mark. He then should have informed John, who finally would have to increase the cap. As the good manager that he was, John knew all these steps were a huge waste of Mark's and our time, so he allowed us to temporarily sign our timesheets locally and start or continue our work. Gather himself all of our cap increase requests together, do all of them simultaneously, and then directly let us know that we could input our timesheets in the software. Then the company was acquired by a hedge fund. Suddenly, a lot of new middle managers appeared, and John was moved to a higher position in a different department. To replace him, they hired Phil. Phil tried to present himself as the open to everyone's requests manager, but it became obvious pretty quickly that he was more of a "I stick to company policies as hard as I can" guy, probably to appeal to his ego or to some higher up. The first thing he did was to completely change the project organization, to better check the project advancement. Now in a project, every task, every little change had its own step and budget cap. Remember that if the step was not in the software, we weren't allowed to start working on it. He then enforced our daily timesheet input. It became mandatory to input them and maximum the next day, so we could be more responsible about marking the project progress. It could have been okay, if it wasn't for the fact that project budgets were drastically reduced. Basically, after reaching the middle of our developments, we already reached those caps, and could not insert any more timesheets. When we started asking Phil about creating those steps, or raising the budget caps, like we did with John, he quickly redirected us to Mark, as that was the company policy and the proper chain of command. Mark's job quickly became hell, as he basically had to spend half of his day asking Phil to create project steps or raise caps. We knew we were bothering Mark, and he knew we couldn't do anything else. He tried to talk to Phil about easing these policies, but without success. At the end of the month, everyone was behind with their timesheet input, and some tasks were not started at all. Phil gathered us and other teams and started his rant about how it was our fault since we required too much time to do our job, and it was not acceptable. As our team leader, Mark was particularly targeted and probably missed some bonuses that he had no problem getting when John was the manager. His fault? Not letting Phil know soon enough that steps weren't available or budget caps were reached. It was enough for him. It was time to maliciously comply with the company policies. He asked Phil to let us stay some minutes after the meeting to explain to us how to resolve this issue. He agreed, but wanted to stay in the meeting too. Mark calmly said to us, "It is imperative that you tell me, and only me, that steps are missing or caps have been reached. As soon as you notice, you must send me an email with this precise subject. I'll then inform Phil. Only mail requests will be accepted." He remarked various times that the mail needed to have a specific subject format, and every time he was looking at us with a look that was saying, "Just do like I say, trust me." We started doing exactly what he told us, and soon discovered why he was so confident. A few days passed, and an angry Phil stormed into our room, yelling at Mark that his behavior was unacceptable, and an urgent meeting with the higher-ups was scheduled in a few minutes. Mark went, and after about half an hour returned with a satisfied smile on his face. And after him, a defeated Phil. He later told us that he set up a forwarding rule in his mailbox, which forwarded to Phil every single mail, whose subject matched the patterns, with a predefined text like, "Dear Phil, I'd like to inform you that the team brought to my attention the fact that Project X is missing step Y," or similar. In those few days, he submerged Phil's mailbox with our requests. Phil probably hoped that the outcome of the meeting would have been in his favor, but the higher-ups stated that no company policy was violated. Mark wasn't spamming, as those were all legitimate work-related emails, and was Phil's duty to appropriately manage the situation. Also, Mark now had proof that he was immediately notifying Phil about the project's issues, so nothing could be his or our fault anymore. I stopped working for the company shortly after, but after a few months, they told me that Phil was demoted and moved to another position with lesser responsibilities. The next story is called Entitled Karen. I work at Woodforest National Bank. This happened about a month ago. One of our usual Entitled Karen customers comes into the bank, demanding we print her a new debit card, because she lost her old one. We issue debit cards the same day, so long as they pay a debit card fee, $10 for a reprint or $15 for a new card, which is waived for certain accounts. A reprint was a simple task, so I printed her card and sent her on her way. She then walks back into the bank, because the last two numbers were slightly rubbed off. This is due to how the machine prints the cards, and is pretty common. "I want you to print this card again. Is it not working? Look at the last two numbers. Other banks don't give me cards with rubbed off numbers. I'm sorry, ma'am, but sometimes that happens with the machine. It rubs part of the numbers off when activating the chip. I don't care. It looks terrible. Do it again." "Ma'am, I don't think this is a good idea. We really don't have control over how the machine." Karen raised her voice and told me, "I don't care what you have to do. Just print my card again so it looks nice." She takes a pair of scissors and cuts up the card into tiny pieces in front of me. "Print the card now, or do I have to close my account and contact the market manager?" The market manager isn't someone you would know, unless you have had a conversation with him before. It's obvious she's trying to name drop him to get me to shut up and comply. Cue Malicious Compliance. I turn over to my manager and he gives me a nod. I then put on a devious smile and say, "Absolutely, ma'am. But to ensure this won't happen again, we will need to change the numbers, so I'm going to need you to sign some things." See? Was that so hard? We then spent the next 10 minutes printing out new cards, until we get one that doesn't have the number slightly rubbed off. Each time the card isn't to her liking, she cuts it up and tells me to do it again. I just smile and say, "Sorry about this, let's try again," each time. Until about 8 cards later, she finally gets a card number that isn't rubbed off. "Finally, this card looks good. Thanks." She just leaves with a smug grin, thinking she won, and leaving us with her massive pile of cut up debit cards. What we forgot to remind her of is having a completely new card generated outside of fraud or expiration costs $15 to be deducted from your account. This is made clear at account opening, and since she signed off on having all these new cards printed, there was nothing she could say. A couple of days later, she comes storming into the bank, looking mad. "What did you do to my account?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but what seems to be the problem? There are a bunch of debit card fees on my account." "What did you do?" "Every time you had me print a new debit card for you the other day, a $15 fee was charged to your account. The first one, where you only had me reprint the card number, was only $10. You need to reverse these fees right now, before I call the market manager and get you fired." At this point, my manager steps in. "Hello, ma'am, what's the issue?" "Your employee tricked me into paying over $100 worth of fees, because he kept messing up my debit card." "Ma'am, could you please not yell? Also, I was there when you demanded we print you a new debit card, because you didn't like the numbers being rubbed off. We have your signature on these forms, stating that you wanted these cards to be printed. I will not be reversing these fees for you." "Then I want to close my account." "Okay, but first you need to pay off your negative account balance, as well as your line of credit. Just give me the market manager's number this instant. Sorry ma'am, but we aren't at liberty to just give out his number like that. Here's the number to customer service if you would like. This is true, as he's instructed us to not give his number out to any customer who asks. The only people who need his number already have it. She takes the number and screams, "I'll have your jobs for this." Then she flips us off, kicks over a chair and storms out. We got a call from customer care later about the incident, where we explained everything and scanned over all the signed debit cards applications. Also, she had us print 8 brand new cards into one reprint. That cost her about $130 in fees, because she demanded a new debit card. The best part is that my manager likely would have just waived the original $10 fee, had she just been nice and asked. The third story is called Crisp Right. Boss has been reaming me out for the past 2 days for being late on a low-stakes client presentation. Said presentation was one I volunteered for, because no one on my tiny overworked team had time to take it. Despite my profuse apologies, she continues to barrage me with really mean personal slags, saying my work is embarrassing and insinuating I'm lazy. So now I'm the deck, racing to redo all the work, so the second version is up to snuff. She offered to copy-edit one of the ideas to be about winter sports instead of BMX, and then proofread it to speed things up. I say yes. The presentation goes out to the client. Once I've had a chance to get coffee after hours of working non-stop, I open up the doc and look at the skiing idea. Turns out crisp right powder and crisp right plus the word that's formed when you lose the D in powder have 2 very different connotations. The last story is called Part-Time. I love my manager. I know that's pretty rare, but she works with our schedules and makes an effort to give us what we want, to make things easier for us. Now, that isn't always possible, but one thing they had always been pushing for was trying to cut payroll. I'm part-time. Working less than full-time hours is better for my schedule than not. It's cheaper to work less than pay for a babysitter. So she'd send us home early if she could. But we got a new staff level manager, and all of a sudden, we needed to help the other departments instead of cutting payroll. And the last time she let us go home early, she got in major trouble, and they made us clock back in to finish helping for the rest of our scheduled shift. We can't go home early anymore? Sure, not a problem. Now she schedules us full hours, and then changes it in the system during the shift. Sorry, I'm not scheduled for 8 hours today. It's actually only 5. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.